Good evening, Tansei, and welcome to APTN National News. I'm Daryl Stranger. We have breaking news out of Ottawa tonight about a story that APTN Investigates broke last week. Canada's Minister of Indigenous Services has ordered her department to launch a thorough investigation into a First Nations child welfare agency at the center of an APTN story that found the agency was directly involved in the sexual abuse of children in its care. The investigation will begin with a meeting scheduled for next week with board members of Wichitawin Family Services based in Fort Frances, Ontario. Government officials from Ontario will also be at the meeting. The APTN investigation revealed the agency has hired at least 2 workers and 1 caregiver, who were previously convicted of sex crimes. You can find much more on our website at aptnnews.ca, and we will bring you more on this story tomorrow. Manitoba RCMP have charged a Thompson, Manitoba man with second-degree murder in relation to the homicide of an Indigenous woman. RCMP found the body of a 33-year-old Geraldine Chubb of Bunabonabee Cree Nation in an apartment building in Thompson last week. Garnet Spencer Budd was also in the apartment. Budd was arrested and charged with murder. He remains in custody. In a written press release, Grand Chief Garrison Satie of the Manitoba Iqaluit Naui Ogamaganak stated Geraldine Chubb was the mother of 3 boys. Satie is also calling for an end to gender-based violence. The Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs has released the list of names of the 7 candidates running to be the next Grand Chief. Running for Grand Chief are Eugene Eastman, Jennifer Flett, George Kemp, Kathy Merrick, Cora Morgan, Sheila North, and Daryl Shorting. The election will be held October 26th at the AMC's General Assembly as AMC looks to find its next Grand Chief following the departure of Arlen Dumas, who was removed from his job this past summer. An all-candidates forum will be held 1 day prior to the election on October the 25th. A by-election in a Mohawk community in Quebec was halted while people were casting their ballots. The reason? The Grand Chief says the Electoral Code needs reforms before going forward, but Serge Simon claims it's his candidacy that caused the election's postponement. Amelia Fournier has more.
Kanesatake is perhaps better known as the community that united against the Canadian Army in 1990 during the Oka crisis. But now it finds itself embroiled in a controversial decision to halt a recent by-election.
I was expecting them to remove me as a candidate, not stop an entire election because of me. And they went even further than I ever thought.
On September 17th, a by-election for the Mohawk Council of Kanesatake, or MCK, closed its doors in the middle of advanced voting. The Grand Chief says the election was halted because the Electoral Code needed changing.
The fact that the Electoral Code that it was based on was full of holes, easily manipulated, and it held legal liabilities if we were to continue with a by-election.
But Serge Simon, who was Grand Chief of Kanesatake for 10 years, thinks it's because of his candidacy.
Even the Grand Chief here, Victor Bonspiel, was elected twice under that code, and all of a sudden, because I'm a candidate, the code is unacceptable.
There were 11 written objections to Simon's candidacy, but the company that manages the election, Planet, determined that the written objections were insufficient to eliminate Simon as a candidate. Victor Bonspiel has been Kanesatake's Grand Chief for the past year. He said the decision to postpone the election, however, came from the Appeals Board.
It was not my decision. It was the Appeals Board decision.
Members of the Appeals Board declined to comment, citing that the election had yet to take place. But one member confirmed that concerns over the Electoral Code were at the heart of the decision to postpone the election. Among their worries, the code prohibits those living off reserve to run for council. This electoral code was passed by Serge Simon in 2015. Bonspiel says the election date won't be determined until the question of the electoral code and conflicts among council members have been resolved.
This decision came from community members, concerned elders and members who have lived here all their lives and grew up with all of this going on. And now with the dysfunctionality and the toxicity in this council, it's needed, it needs to fix itself here. We got to clean our house before we add a new addition.
APTN News spoke to former Chief Jeremy Tomlinson over the phone. He said that these tensions are one of the reasons why he left his position as chief in February 2022, the position that was meant to be filled with this by-election. Bonspiel says these tensions may have been worsened by his decision to launch an audit of the council's pandemic response unit and how it spent federal COVID funds while Simon was Grand Chief.
I think a lot of this has to do with the fact that I began the process of a forensic audit, along with Jeremy Tomlinson.
In addition to the audit, Quebec's provincial police force is conducting its own investigation into the spending, something confirmed by APTN News. But Simon maintains that he did what was necessary to protect Kanesatake during the pandemic and wants to continue to serve his community.
The lack of leadership at that table at MCK, that's what's causing this whole thing. And I'm hoping that in my way, if I do get into council, it's not to go in there and join the fight. It's to go in there and hopefully, with my experience, help move things along, with or without the Grand Chief.
Despite the tensions, Bonspiel and Simon agree on one thing, that change is desperately needed in the Mohawk Council of Kanesatake. Emilia Fournier, APTN National News, Kanesatake.
Iqaluit residents were surprised to learn yesterday afternoon that their mayor, Kenny Bell, was resigning with 1 year left in his term. Our Kent Driscoll joins us from Iqaluit. Kent, what happened?
Thanks. Iqaluit's now former mayor, Kenny Bell, used one of his favorite communication methods, his Twitter account, to announce yesterday that he was resigning as mayor effective immediately. And he didn't go into much more detail than that. He thanked everyone, and then he urged City Council to keep pursuing an inquiry into the government response into last year's water crisis here in the city. Now, that water crisis is one of the things that may have made Mayor Bell one of the best-known mayors of just 8,000 people in the country. Last year, when diesel was discovered in the Iqaluit water supply, and the city spent 2 months on bottled water, he was front and center in the response. That led to what you would have to mark as his biggest achievement, over $200 million in federal funding to fix the water problems that continue to plague the city. Now, controversy was never too far away for Bell, and his resignation, that was no exception. Turns out he was in Iceland last week, representing the city of Iqaluit at an international conference. He didn't attend a panel he was supposed to present at. Now, Bell has told council he will reimburse them the cost of the trip, but he still hasn't explained why he skipped his planned appearance. Now, for good or ill, Bell is best described as a fighter. Back in 2014, when he was a city councillor, he was the council member behind the first raising of a gay pride flag at Iqaluit City Hall. He had absolutely no patience for anyone who disagreed with that decision. On the other hand, he posted on Facebook back in April about punching a man outside of a local grocery store. He says the man threatened him, so he, quote, popped him. As for the future, I sent him a text and he got back to us rather quickly. He tells us he'll have more to say in his future sometime in the next week or so. But for now, he just wanted to let people know that he plans on remaining in Iqaluit. So please don't phone him up and ask if he's looking to sell his house or his car. Back to you in Winnipeg.
All right, it's time for a short break, but stick around. More news when we come back. Welcome back. It's been a busy week as the inquest into the deaths of 2 First Nations men who died in Thunder Bay police custody continues. Police Services Act charges have also been leveled at the currently suspended chief of police for alleged deceit and discreditable conduct. Here to bring us up to speed on what's happening in Thunder Bay is the Globe and Mail's Willow Fiddler. Willow, let's start with the charges against Thunder Bay Police Chief Sylvie Hoth. She was suspended already, and then she announced her retirement. So what can you tell us about the findings of the Ontario Civilian Police Commission in that matter?
So we already knew back in June that the OCPC substantiated the allegations against Sylvie Hoth. She's been charged with discreditable conduct and deceit, and that's for allegations for her role and involvement in an investigation that took place into a Thunder Bay Police Board member, Georgianne Morrisseau, who last year we know filed human rights complaints against the service and the board for discrimination and harassment. So those allegations against Sylvie, I mean, they're not directly related to the human rights complaints, but involves the board member Georgianne Morrisseau and some other things that were happening. So we knew that back in June. The OCPC has now last week said that they've completed that investigation. They've scheduled a hearing for Sylvie Hoth, which is scheduled for February 2023. They also exonerated basically the Deputy Chief Ryan Hughes, who was suspended last February or January by the board in what I'm going to say is an unrelated matter, but it's the board had said at the time it was an internal human resources matter. So he had allegations as well for his involvement in that investigation of board member Georgianne Morrisseau, but has now been exonerated. The board says he's still under suspension, so not sure what's happening with that. And then there was a third allegation that involved Sylvie Hoth, the suspended police chief, Deputy Chief Ryan Hughes, and the service's legal counsel Holly Walburn for collusion related to the OCPC's investigation and their request to get information from them. They weren't able to substantiate any of those allegations with no evidence, and that I think is in part because they weren't able to interview neither the police chief. The police chief didn't consent to an interview for that. So yeah, that's what we know with the police chief right now. She's scheduled for a hearing in February.
Right. So also the administrator of the Thunder Bay Police Services Board has had his role extended into the new year. There's a search for a new police chief underway. Criminal investigations are still underway. Human rights complaints. I mean, where does this police service and the board go next?
Yeah, good question. That's kind of all up in the air still at this point. Like you said, there's still investigations happening. The Ontario Provincial Police are have been investigating since earlier this year as well, into senior members of the force. So we're kind of waiting for that to wrap up. So at this point, with the administrator now in place until next March, we're also waiting on basically, so yeah, a new police chief, a new board. That new board is all up in the air right now because of municipal elections that are happening here in the city. Because some of those appointments will come from the city, the other appointments will come from the province. And I want to mention that there's this expert panel that's been involved too, and this expert panel is a group of policing and governance experts that includes the chair right now. The chair is the former chair of the Toronto Police Board, and I think they're having an impact on this process as well. They released an interim report a few weeks ago, or not long ago, with their recommendations on how the administrator and board need to move forward on the crucial things right now is the new police chief and the new board, and that is all kind of sitting with them to make the meaningful changes that this city has been waiting for when it comes to policing.
And Willow, let's move now to the inquest into the deaths of Roland McKay and Don Mamakwa. Now in its second week, they died years apart, but under similar circumstances while in the custody of Thunder Bay Police. Can you bring us up to speed and up to date on where that's at?
Yeah, and I just want to first mention and acknowledge the families involved in this inquest. It's not an easy process. They have been extremely brave and courageous for being there. I had the chance to go late last week, and saw them And it's difficult, so difficult. They're having to sit there during this inquest and watch, hear and see this evidence in the moments that, that their loved ones died. So yeah, similar circumstances. This is basically, looking at, this inquest is looking at how the Thunder Bay Police kind of interact and engage with intoxicated people, and particularly Indigenous intoxicated people, and that's based on things like stereotypes and biases, which, of course, this is nothing new for Thunder Bay. We've, the police have been subject to many inquests and investigations and reports that have found that these stereotypes and biases and racism affect how they police Indigenous people. So the inquest is hearing, from the family testified last week. They're hearing from medical experts this week who, said that it was quite likely that one of the men would still be alive had he been taken to hospital instead of jail. So again, this is also looking at how, what the appropriate response is to intoxicated people who may be, needing medical care and treatment instead of police custody. So we're hearing from experts in those areas. And the officers and the first responders as well, who were involved in the treatment of those two men.
All right, we'll have to leave it there, Willow, but we certainly appreciate your insight into some of this, and it's always great chatting with you, so thank you for this.
Thanks, Daryl.
All right, time for one final break. More news coming up. Welcome back. It's time now for our photo of the day. Today's photo was submitted by Marlene King, and this looks like it could be a candidate for a 1,000-piece puzzle. It's a boat harbor located in Bella Coola, British Columbia. Thanks so much for sharing, Marlene. If you have a great photo, we want to see it. Email your photos to share@aptn.ca for the chance to be our next photo of the day. And now let's take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. Starting over on the East Coast, 13 and clear in Fredericton and 14 in showers in Halifax. 15 in Happy Valley Goose Bay and 15 in Cartwright. 10 degrees in showers in Quebec City and 3 in Val-d'Or. 7 degrees in London and 5 in North Bay. 3 degrees in Wawa and 6 in the Sioux Lookout. 8 degrees in Churchill and 10 in Thompson. 11 and a mix of sun and cloud in Barons River and 16 in Winnipeg. 16 in Regina and 13 in North Battleford. 19 in Buffalo Narrows and 11 in Stony Rapids. Moving west, 13 in Fort Chipewyan and 11 in Grand Prairie. 12 in Edmonton and 15 in Calgary. 16 degrees in Campbell River and 9 in Bella Coola. 12 degrees in Sandspit and 12 in Fort Nelson. 8 degrees in a mix of sun and cloud in Whitehorse and -1 in Old Crow. -4 in Norman Wells and 14 in Clear and Trout Lake. -5 in Fort McPherson and -3 in Newvik. -1 in Baker Lake and -5 in Cambridge Bay. -7 in Arctic Bay and -4 in Iqaluit. Danita Large is a Cree singer-songwriter who topped the Indigenous Music Countdown last year with her hit, Going to Walk That Line. Now she has written Reconciliation Sky to honor residential school survivors and those who never came home. APTN's Chris Stewart spoke to the Edmonton artist.
Reconciliation Sky, orange sunset, wash over me.
Donita Large has come a long way in a very short time. Last summer, her debut single, Going to Walk That Line, became a big hit, topping the Indigenous Music Countdown. Now, the blues gospel singer has a new song out called Reconciliation Sky. The inspiration came from the discovery of possible unmarked graves in a former residential school in Kamloops, BC.
The first line that came to me was, can you honor the bones of our children? And it was something that just kind of rang in my head, because it was like, here's an opportunity now to look at not only our history, but what are you going to do to actually acknowledge and rectify the truth, and to honor the families. Think of all the mothers who couldn't sing a lullaby.
The 2015 Truth and Reconciliation Commission report states that at least 4,000 children died in residential schools across Canada. Large wrote to honor those children who survived and those children who didn't.
I wanted it to be both for the children who went to residential school, so part of it was to honor my dad, and we had talked about his story, and you know, at the beginning of the song I acknowledge that part of the story. And the other part is the children who didn't come home.
Large is hoping her song resonates with people of all cultures, no matter who you are.
We're at a point now where we're not only talking about reconciliation, but we're also talking about equality, diversity, inclusion, anti-racism, concepts that really, at the end of the day, mean sitting together and learning from each other and understanding each other and accepting each other in a way that we haven't before. Can you honor the bones of our children who didn't come home, who didn't come home?
Chris Stewart, APTN National News, Edmonton.
On this week's episode of In Focus, we put Indigenous policing in the spotlight. Here's a little bit of what happened.
These acts of violence have to stop, and they have to stop now. We ask that we have our own tribal policing.
Again, what has come to light in regards to the policing and how matters were escalated because of one of the biggest grievances, a slow response time. This is a case like others where, you know, police could have been, it could have been prevented had there been action, you know, prior to the incident escalating.
There's a historic mistrust between Indigenous peoples and, you know, RCMP and other police forces. So how does First Nations Police Services, you know, try to bridge that gap of sorts?
Well, I think just by the presence in the community, having a good solid relationship, let the community get to know who you are. Hopefully the community starts to see them as their police service as opposed to a police service that comes in from somewhere else.
When you look at the makeup of each Indigenous police service, we are underfunded. Therefore, we don't have the resources for frontline response on a 24/7 basis.
All right, that's all we have for you tonight on APTN National News. For more Indigenous news, you can visit our website, aptnnews.ca. For all of us here, I'm Daryl Stranger. Thank you for joining us tonight. Miigwech, have a great night.